She emerged from the shadows to create a global empire. Marjorie Rieu was the invisible force driving Andre Rieu's ascent to fame for almost 50 years. His manager, his wife, his writer, and his toughest guardian, they overcame the classical world together. However, she is now bidding farewell. T is now bidding farewell. Everything changed once Andre's health took a terrible turn. Something snapped beneath the glitz. Marjorie is also discreetly leaving while Andre celebrates his 75th birthday with the rest of the world. What became of the woman who kept everything together? Everything began to fall apart in 2012. Andre Rieu, the so-called king of the waltz, had no intention of slowing down at the height of his international renown. Without missing a beat, he was traveling across continents, packing arenas with his Jan Strauss ensemble, and balancing international media appearances, TV specials, and concerts. He looked unbeatable for decades. He was unaffected by delays, sick days, or even jet lag. But something broke in July 2010. Andre woke up at 3 in the morning as he and his wife Marjorie were on vacation in Belgium, and everything was swirling around him. Not literally, but symbolically. The walls tilted, the ceiling twisted, the floor seemed to have fallen out from under him. Sweat soaked him, nausea overcame him, and he was unable to stand. He dismissed it at first. Perhaps it was simply fatigue. He had been working really hard, fitting last-minute tour preparation, studio recordings, and Spanish lessons into 1 week. He even thought that maintaining happiness and productivity helped prevent sickness. However, he was unable to smile through this. The dizziness persisted into the morning. Rather, it grew worse. He was diagnosed by doctors with vestibular neuritis, which is caused by a virus that infects the inner ear and interferes with the vestibular nerve. That nerve is in charge of equilibrium. Extreme vertigo, disorientation, and motion sickness are caused by the brain receiving confused signals when it becomes inflamed. It was awful for Andre. He had more than a slight case of vertigo. He was unable to walk straight. He was unable to practice. Even holding his violin made him feel as though the room was tilting. This is where things became serious. The following week, he was scheduled to perform in Amsterdam. A sold-out show with 60,000 fans waiting is no minor feat. However, there was no miraculous return this time. Rest is the sole cure, according to his doctor. At that point, things began to go south. For Marjorie as well as for Andre, Marjorie Rieu is more than simply his spouse. She is the silent power behind all of his endeavors. She is a qualified composer and a language instructor by profession. Fonsa. Andre has been her spouse since 1975. That's more than 40 years of collaboration. Not only romantic, but also imaginative, practical, and sentimental. Marjorie manages the business part of the enterprise while Andre travels the world. She manages, writes, and safeguards his time and effort. However, there was no commercial plan for this in 2010. Andre's tour of Australia had to be cancelled. He then canceled his shows in the UK. It was not a little local gig. There were hundreds of jobs associated with these big stadium events via transportation teams, stage managers, orchestra members, and lighting crews. He was responsible for the pay of 120 persons in total. Before his own profits are included, his monthly overhead is more than £825,000. Therefore, his illness was more than just a personal crisis. A full-fledged economic storm hit, and the center of it was Marjorie. From their castle in MRI, which dates back to the 15th century and which Andre had coveted since he was a young boy, things were kept together by Marjorie. She maintained the business. The communications were handled by her. Most importantly, she ensured that despite his desire to push through his illness, Andre remained focused on his recovery. Since he made an effort, he persisted in pushing, requesting medicine, attempting to walk, and practicing, but to no avail. His body resisted. He was reminded by Marjorie Rieu. This was a survival test rather than a strength test. The irony? Andre had thought that he was immune to burnout for years before this happened. He firmly believed that his body could be controlled by his mind and that he could avoid collapse by focusing only on positivity. However, there are boundaries for even the most driven performance, and he hit us this time. He was unable to tour for 3 months in a row. He had a hard time getting out of bed. He felt guilty, as though he was disappointing everyone. He was too tired to even play with his grandchildren. He once likened his persistent perspiration to going through menopause. He made a joke about it, but it was obvious what was going on. There was more to this than an ear virus. It served as a warning. Tests were conducted by doctors. To rule out a malignancy, he had a brain scan performed, so even if the scans were clear, the recuperation was harsh. Balance retraining, physical therapy, and a series of tiresome but essential exercises were the only treatments available. No medications or miraculous cures. He was standing on one leg, shifting his eyes up and down and side to side while tracing figures with his feet, 3 times a day for 30 minutes each time. It operated brutally and slowly. However, the emotional toll remained even as Andre's physical recovery progressed. Everything was clouded by the fear of relapsing. The recurrence rate of vestibular neuritis is approximately 5%, and one of the main triggers is stress. Andre was forced to reconsider everything, including his life and schedule, and Marjorie entered the picture once more. She assisted him in creating 2 lists. Playing music, giving performances, and recording CDs were all things he liked about his job. He was exhausted by everything else. Meetings, commercial negotiations, press conferences, speaking appearances, and operational management. The second list has a lot more items, so they chopped it together. They took his calendar away, they changed his priorities. They agreed that going forward, he would just concentrate on music and let Marjorie to protect him from the others. Workload wasn't the only consideration in that choice. Dude, pray wasn't. It was a matter of survival. On stage, Andre might have appeared unbeatable, but Marjorie knew otherwise. She'd seen him at his weakest, struggling to stay balanced, sweating through a fever, and feeling ashamed just to go to the restroom. She stood by his side, ensuring that the world was never aware of how close it was to shattering him. Being ostentatious was never the goal of their partnership. Marjorie seldom ever goes to concerts or other events with him. She really stated at one point that she didn't want her status as Andre Rieu's wife to define her. She is independent in her identity, her career, and her thoughts. However, you can see the strength behind the scenes in times like this. They brought up 2 sons together. They now have 5 grandkids. They reside in the same castle where Andre learned to play the piano as a little boy. And even when the globe began to spin, Marjorie remained grounded despite all the attention, the fame, the pandemonium, the music, and the spotlights. Andre returned to the stage in 2013. He recovered more quickly than the doctors had anticipated. He was stabilized by the lifestyle modifications, therapy, and eye exercises. However, the fear persisted, and the role shifted for Marjorie. She was no longer merely providing backing for a traveling artist. By 1978, Andre was performing with Gemma Serpent's Salon Ensemble and had joined the Lindbergh Symphony Orchestra. Marjorie discovered she was pregnant at about the same time. They were working for gigs in retirement homes while balancing their families, teaching, and music. It would be an understatement to say that things were busy. However, they continued. The talking pieces in between songs were written with Marjorie's assistance. She arranged pamphlets. She booked performances by standing at event booths. They had dreamed of theaters and international tours while doing free performances in tiny spaces for a few dozen people. It wasn't luck when their 1994 album Strauss and Company and the viral smash song The Second Waltz brought them their big break. Brick by brick. It took years to build. It wasn't all smooth, though. They were almost bankrupted by that 2008 reproduction of Schönbrunn Palace. Seeing the money leave more quickly than it enters caused Marjorie to have restless nights. But she remained cool, collected, and cautious of Sean's. In order to counterbalance Andre's enthusiasm for painting, their son Pierre eventually joined the company and brought another level of business acumen. She still stays away from the spotlight. No new pictures or interviews with the public unless absolutely required. She avoids recognition by traveling under her maiden name. That's intention, not shyness. Marjorie maintains a balance that allows them both to breathe while Andre gets more visible with each trip. Andre has slowed down at home. He diligently plans and prepares organic dinners. The Orangery is their favorite place to spend quiet time. This indoor paradise, which was created by Andre himself, is teeming with exotic plants, vibrant butterflies, and koi fish swimming beneath murals in the Tuscan style. After the turmoil of touring, it serves as his retreat. Before the next great adventure, they reset there. However, how did Andre develop such an invincible drive? Even though the chances were against him, who taught him to put all of his money on his dream? That explanation stems from a single guy, Andre Rieu's Jewish father-in-law, who influenced his outlook and may have been the true factor in his success. Edgar Common was not well known. His presence permeated every note Andre played, even though he didn't hold a baton or appear on stages. And Edgar survived the Holocaust. In 1932, his father fled Berlin in search of safety and mastery. The rest of the family joined 2 years later. During the war, Edgar fled into hiding under the protection of Nelly, a Dutch girl who would later marry him and become the mother-in-law of Andre. Nelly put everything on the line. She assisted Jewish families in surviving by joining the Dutch resistance. An Israeli family thanked Nelly for saving their grandmother's life in a letter that Andre received years later. He remembered that event as a reminder of the legacy his marriage had bound him to, rather than as a faraway story from the past. Edgar's record collection followed. Andre gained more than just a spouse when he wed Marjorie in 1975. He entered a brand new auditory realm. It wasn't cash or souvenirs that Edgar valued most. There were more than 300 records in the vinyl collection. Andre was exposed to a new language, a new beat, and an entirely new aspect of music through that collection. Until that point, Andre was surrounded by the titans of classical music, including Bach, Beethoven, and Bruckner. However, Edgar's albums introduced him to opera, songs from the 1920s, and yes, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. It was like walking into color for the first time for someone who was brought up in a rigidly traditional musical family. Andre took in the information, not merely listening to it. The MRI Salon Orchestra's initial concerts were based on the record collection. The repertoire was molded by it. It influenced the atmosphere. It even influenced the spirit, the logo, and the blend of nostalgia and fun. Edgar's taste and Marjorie's early impact were the root of it all. The influence of Edgar was not technical. It was sentimental. He helped Andre understand the meaning of the sound. And that influence is still manifesting itself in real life decades later. Andre performs the famous klezmer composition Haba Nashila at almost every performance. With more than 14 million views on YouTube, his 2010 rendition of it is among the most popular classical music videos on the internet. And it's no accident. Edgar, history, and the fortitude of those who created something new when all was taken away are all honored. Andre still proudly bears that burden. The response is electrifying when he performs in Israel. Crowds yell, flags fly, and he responds with regional tunes like Jerusalem of Gold, incorporating each culture into his world tour. Since 2018, he has given concerts in Tel Aviv, and each one has been more of a reunion than a performance. Edgar is still guided by his story behind the scenes. Andre is aware of the family's origins. He is aware of how nearly everything ended before it started, and for that very reason, he uses music to celebrate life. The message is straightforward. Continue dancing, continue to dream, continue. Andre continued to move even during the lockdown, when performances were canceled and stages were deserted. He prepared pastries for his community. He created Magical Mastery, a unique virtual concert, by compiling video from previous performances. Fans from all around the world were able to feel the emotion, the enthusiasm, and the nostalgia from the comfort of their own homes thanks to the events live streaming from December 19 to January 3. His pace remained constant. He actually stepped up his efforts. He will celebrate his 75th birthday in 2025 with a global film festival called The Dream Continues. This is more than a list of his best songs. It's an invitation to a legacy. Andre creates a journey through his favorite international performances, from Sydney to Bahrain, from New York to Vienna. The Phantom of the Opera's sweeping rendition of the evening's music was one of the highlights. Another, a poignant duet in which he and his brother Robert sing Paishu while reminiscing about their early years in mastery. Andre opens up in between numbers, sharing tales, recollections, and insights from a life characterized by tenacity and enthusiasm. Emma is the next in line. She has been traveling the globe with Andre and the Johann Strauss Orchestra since 2024. She has traveled to Bahrain, Colombia, Mexico, Chile, and other places. Something significant is indicated by her appearance on stage. Andre's tale continues to grow. He has no intention of slowing down. By working together, he's bringing in fresh faces and voices while preserving the legacy. And you begin to understand the big picture when you consider how a youngster from MRI with a used violin ended up being one of the world's best-selling classical musicians. A man brought up in a rigid tradition, a young couple making do with retirement homes and concerts. A fantasy driven by vinyl recordings and surviving the war. A career that crosses genres, generations, and continents. It all stems from that subdued impact. The one who made sure the spotlight was always shining, but never stood in it. The essence of the music was shaped in part by Edgar Cohen, and Marjorie continued it by incorporating her father's heritage into each choice, arrangement, and tour. Therefore, it is not because she is done that Marjorie is stepping back today and bidding farewell to the limelight, the tour buses, and the long hours backstage. It's because she fulfilled her obligation. She laid the groundwork, but the world sees Andre. When the dream was but a spark, she carried it. Now Marjorie observes from a quiet corner while Andre performs for sold-out audiences in Tel Aviv, Vienna, and Sydney, knowing that each note tells their story. Fame wasn't the start of this adventure, which took them from war-torn Berlin to crowded stadiums across 5 continents. I crossed it. Love, albums, tenacity, and the kind of unappreciated support were the beginnings. What comes next in the music? That's the last query. The answer is straightforward, especially because Emma is moving up the ranks. Andre has already celebrated his 75th birthday, and the orchestra is still performing all over the world. The waltz goes on.